This is breaking. Angel Reese's time in Chicago has come to an end after 2 seasons. The two-time All-Star is headed to the Dream via a trade. Multiple sources confirmed to one Annie Costable, Taylor Rooks, Angel Reese's bestie, first on the news. Finally, the Sky found someone to con into trading for her.
Let me tell you something that the mainstream sports media is completely ignoring right now. And honestly, that's not surprising, because what actually happened between Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky is so much messier, so much more revealing than anyone is willing to admit on television. They'll give you the press release version. They'll read you the quote from the general manager about roster balance and great opportunities for all parties. But you and I both know that when a front office starts talking about opportunities for all parties, somebody got played. And today, we're going to talk about exactly who got played, why it happened, and what the real reason is that nobody, and I mean nobody, is putting on their front page. Because here's the thing, Angel Reese didn't just get traded. She got quietly pushed out the back door of a franchise that never deserved her in the first place. And the way it happened, the timing, the price they got for her, the complete silence from people who should be screaming about this, all of it tells a story. A story that only makes sense once you understand one very important thing about the WNBA right now. This league has a Caitlin Clark problem, not the kind of problem where Clark is doing something wrong. The opposite, the kind of problem where one player is so dominant, so commercially powerful, so undeniably the center of gravity for the entire sport, that every other decision in this league gets made in her shadow, including this one. So let's start from the beginning. Because context is everything. When the Chicago Sky drafted Angel Reese 7th overall in 2024, they thought they had something special. And look, they weren't wrong about her talent. In her first 2 seasons in the WNBA, Reese made the All-Star team twice. She averaged 14.1 points, 12.9 rebounds, 2.7 assists, and 1.4 steals per game. She set the longest double-double streak in WNBA history at 15 consecutive games. By any statistical measure, Angel Reese performed. She showed up. She produced, and the Chicago Sky still got rid of her for 2 mid-round future draft picks from a team that nobody expects to be tanking anytime soon. Let that sink in. 2 picks for a 23-year-old two-time All-Star, a player in the absolute prime window of her career. Now I want you to think about what 2 draft picks from the Atlanta Dream are actually worth. The Dream, under head coach Carl Smesko, just had their most productive offensive season in franchise history. They're not rebuilding. They're ascending. So those 2027 and 2028 first-round picks that Chicago received, they're almost certainly landing somewhere in the middle of the first round. Not top 5 picks. Not franchise-altering selections. Mid-teens. Best-case scenario. That is what the Chicago Sky decided Angel Reese was worth after 2 years of her giving everything she had to a franchise that was actively falling apart around her. And that right there is the real story. Not that Reese got traded. Not that Atlanta is getting a steal, though they absolutely are. The real story is what the Chicago Sky's decision reveals about how this organization has been run. Because let's be completely honest about what happened in Chicago over the last 2 years. 2 head coaches, back-to-back lottery records, a practice facility that still hasn't opened, a front office that burned a first-round pick just to move up and draft Reese in 2024, and then turned around and sold her for futures that may never equal what they gave up. The franchise spent lottery-level capital to acquire her, went 23 wins and 61 losses with her on the roster, and then walked away with assets that don't even begin to cover what they originally paid. That is not asset management. That is organizational failure. And Angel Reese was the one left holding the bag. But here's where it gets interesting, because the Chicago Sky didn't just decide to move Reese because of bad management alone. There's another layer to this. When Reese went public last year and said, and these are essentially her words, that she was not settling for the same losing, that the team needed better players, that she wanted to compete at the highest level. That was the moment the relationship became irreparable. She was suspended for statements detrimental to the team. She sat out the final 3 games of the season, officially listed with a back injury, and, from that point forward, everyone in the building knew it was over. Now I'm going to say something that a lot of people won't say. Angel Reese was not wrong. She wasn't wrong about the team needing to improve. She wasn't wrong about wanting to win. She was just honest. In a league that is rapidly changing, in an era where players are finally getting paid real money under a new CBA that has the Supermax sitting at $1.4 million, Angel Reese had every right to look around at her situation and demand better. The problem is, she said it out loud. And organizations, no matter what sport you're talking about, do not forgive players who embarrass them publicly, even when the player is right. So when you ask why the Chicago Sky quietly dumped Angel Reese for next to nothing, understand that it wasn't purely a basketball decision. It was personal. It was institutional. And it was the final act of a franchise that had already decided it could not and would not build around a player who had stopped pretending everything was fine. And then there is the shadow that hangs over all of this, the one nobody wants to talk about directly. The Indiana Fever are right there. Caitlin Clark is right there. The most commercially powerful player in the history of women's professional basketball is right there in the same division, signing a contract worth more than anything the WNBA has ever seen, with a Nike shoe line coming, with NBC Sports appearances that draw national audiences, with free agents lining up to share a locker room with her, while Angel Reese was getting traded for 2 draft picks. That contrast is not accidental. That contrast is the entire story. Because here is what nobody in mainstream media will put together for you. The WNBA in 2026 is not a league of equals anymore. It never really was, but now the gap is visible from space. On one side you have Indiana. You have Caitlin Clark returning fully healthy after a 2025 season that was stolen from her by injuries, returning to a Fever roster that just handed Kelsey Mitchell a core designation, returning to a city and a fan base that has been waiting with the kind of patience that only comes from genuine belief. On the other side, you have franchises like the Chicago Sky, who spent 2 years failing their best player and then sold her off quietly while the sports world was busy watching free agency chaos unfold everywhere else. And Angel Reese lands in Atlanta, grateful for a fresh start, saying all the right things about being excited and focused and ready to give everything to the dream. And look, I believe her. I genuinely do. But let's not pretend the circumstances that brought her there were anything other than a betrayal dressed up in front office language. Now let's talk about Atlanta for a second, because the Dream actually made a brilliant move here, and they deserve credit for it. Carl Smesko built the most productive offense in Dream franchise history last season, with a group that didn't include a single player of Reese's caliber. His system rewards positionless play, spacing, and high basketball IQ. And what a lot of people miss about Angel Reese is that she is not just a rebounder. She is a developing offensive player with real vision and a hunger to improve that even her harshest critics have to acknowledge. Pairing her with Alicia Gray, with Ryan Howard, with a coaching staff that actually wants to build around her rather than scapegoat her, that is a combination that could genuinely make Atlanta dangerous. The Dream could be a finals contender before this season is 3 months old, and the 2 draft picks Chicago received. If Atlanta goes deep in 2026 and 2027, those picks land in the mid to late teens. The Sky gave away their future for futures that may never arrive. But here's the part of the story that keeps coming back to me. The part that I think is the real reason nobody wants to say this out loud. Angel Reese, for all her talent, for all her records, for all her All-Star appearances, has spent 2 years being measured against a standard that was never applied fairly. Every statistical milestone she achieved got filtered through a comparison that she never asked for and never deserved. Every game, every interview, every social media post existed in the gravitational pull of one question that the internet could not stop asking. Is she as good as Caitlin Clark? And the answer to that question, which is complicated and contextual and requires actual basketball analysis to address properly, got flattened into a culture war, into a ratings comparison, into a narrative that pitted 2 young women against each other for the entertainment of an audience that wanted a villain and a hero and didn't much care which was which. And what did that narrative do to Angel Reese's value inside the Chicago Sky organization? Think about it. The Sky are not a market like Indiana. They don't have the Caitlin Clark effect driving ticket sales and television ratings and national media attention. They needed Angel Reese to be their version of that. They needed her to carry the commercial weight of the franchise on her back, while also producing on the court, while also keeping quiet about the fact that the roster around her was not good enough to compete. And when she couldn't do all 3 of those things simultaneously, when she spoke honestly about the team's shortcomings, they decided she was the problem, not the 2 coaching changes, not the losing record, not the unopened practice facility. Angel Reese, 23 years old, 2-time All-Star, longest double-double streak in league history. The problem. That is the real reason nobody is talking about what actually happened here, because talking about it honestly means acknowledging that a young black woman who performed at an elite level was pushed out of a franchise for having the audacity to want to win. And it means acknowledging that the system that was supposed to support her, the front office, the coaching staff, the league structure itself, let her down at every single turn. So instead, we get press releases about roster balance. We get quotes about great opportunities for all parties. We get a news cycle that moves on in 48 hours because free agency is happening and there are bigger names to discuss. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark is coming back healthy. Meanwhile, the Indiana Fever are building what looks like the most complete roster they have had since Clark arrived. Kelsey Mitchell with a core designation, Aaliyah Boston in the front court, and Clark herself fully healed, spending the offseason appearing on NBC Sports, working courtside at NBA games, launching a Nike signature shoe line with a release date already set and colorways already leaking online. The Caitlin 1. Holiday 2026. Retailing at $140 for adults, $115 for kids. The commercial empire is not slowing down. It is accelerating, and every other player in this league, every other franchise, every other storyline exists in relation to that acceleration, whether they want to or not. So when you look at what happened at Angel Reese in Chicago, don't just see a trade. See the gap. See what happens to a franchise that doesn't have a Caitlin Clark and doesn't know how to build without one. See what happens to a player who deserved better and said so, and got punished for it. See the WNBA in 2026, clearly, with both eyes open, without the filter of the press release or the comfort of the mainstream narrative. Because the truth is sitting right there in the transaction wire. 2 draft picks. For a 23-year-old two-time All-Star. Nobody is talking about the real reason. Now you know it, and you cannot unknow it. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you actually think the Chicago Sky should have done. Tell me if you think Angel Reese gets the last laugh in Atlanta. Tell me if you think Caitlin Clark's Fever are about to make everybody look foolish when the 2026 season tips off on May 8th, because this offseason is only getting started, and something tells me we are nowhere near the last bombshell. Stay locked in.